Welcome everybody to ICUJP Friday Morning Forum. Good to have everybody here. Thank you for all being here. And if you notice on your email that you got about this, there are ways you can donate. That's really important to us because we have work that we do that takes money, like, you know, getting information out and building the community. We always appreciate your donations. Rick, could you tell us about who to expect next Friday?
Sure. Next week, we have Kate Thurston from the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. And one of their exhibits right now is on the Hollywood blacklist and how it affected people. She's actually going to be giving some of her personal background with that as well. And be showing us some parts of the exhibit and some of the history. So if you can all join us, it's a very interesting time to do it with the SAG-AFTRA strike starting up last night. So yeah, that'd be great if you all can join us.
Sunday, September 10. This is our annual George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Awards event. We're so pleased to be back at All Saints Church in Pasadena to celebrate coming together on that important event, remembering George Regas, remembering all of the people that have been so instrumental in the peace and justice movement. This year's event has a theme that housing is a human right. We will be honoring our own Anthony Manousis and Jill Shook and making housing and community happen. We'll be honoring All Saints Church houselessness program. And we have a few invitations out for additional honorees. So there'll be more announcements coming along. But for now, just save the afternoon beginning at about 1 o'clock at All Saints Church in Pasadena on Sunday, September 10. We hope as many of you can join us as possible.
All right, thank you. And that leads us to the reflection, which is going to be by Steve.
I'm back. Sometimes a book comes along that is so insightful that I'm eager to share it with people. The book I'm speaking of today is The Nation That Never Was, Reconstructing America's Story by Kermit Roosevelt III, the great-grandson of Teddy Roosevelt and a distant cousin of FDR. He's a professor of constitutional law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School, former clerk to Supreme Court Justice David Souter, has written several books. I am reviewing this book for the LA Lawyer magazine because I wanted to give it as much attention as possible. What Professor Roosevelt takes on here is nothing less than challenging the comforting standard story of the American founding. We saw this around July 4th. We see it in many of the political campaigns. We see it in conservative think tanks and organizations. It's the comforting story that our values today were shaped and established by the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, and the Founders' Constitution. These folks stop there, failing to recognize what Professor Roosevelt brings across so vividly, which is that a lot happened in American history since that period, and that we are not the heirs of the slave-owning men that founded this country. 47 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Of the 47, 34 were slave owners. 26 of the 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia owned human beings. No less than the eight of the first 12 US presidents were slave owners. That is that period of history. But what happened in reaction to that period is that the Confederacy lost the Civil War. We had the Emancipation Proclamation. We had the Gettysburg Address. We had Reconstruction. And we had the creation of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which amended the US Constitution. So today, people like those gathering here, we are the heirs of that new birth of freedom that Lincoln spoke about at the time of the Gettysburg Address. The essential point of Roosevelt's book is, quote, "Our ideals are not handed down by the men who created America in 1776. Instead, these ideals are articulated in reaction to the oppression and exclusion of that America, and fought for in large part by the people who were excluded." So much of this book is eye-opening, and he puts these historical events in context. I won't be able to do justice in this short reflection, but as soon as my book review is published later this month, I will circulate it to this group. Very briefly, with the Declaration of Independence, he points out that unlike the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen adopted by the Revolutionary National Assembly in France in 1789, ours was a declaration of independence, not a declaration of rights. And from what country were we declaring independence? That was the country of England, which at the time was in the midst of abolishing slavery. The founders wanted the independence to maintain and perpetuate their class status and their right to own human beings. Meanwhile, in England, in the Somerset decision in 1772, a freed slave from England was granted his freedom with a declaration that as soon as a man sets foot on English ground, he is free. England was moving away from slavery. The American founders, by and large, and there were exceptions like Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and a few others, they wanted the right to own slaves. And in large part, that's why they fought the Revolutionary War. And when they came to the signing of the Constitution, it was essentially a pro-slavery constitution. It maintained the importation of slaves for another 20 years. It had the nefarious 3/5 clause, counting slaves as only 3/5 of a person. The South wanted them counted because it added to their power in Congress, but they didn't want them counted as full human beings. And so we threw off all of that. And in the Declaration of, in the Emancipation Proclamation signed on January 1st, 1863, it was the first time that in American history that the nation actually set itself against slavery. The proclamation said all persons held as slaves in the rebellious states are and henceforth shall be free. And at the Gettysburg Address, for the first time, an American president spoke of the right of all people to be free. Finally, the 14th Amendment overturned the Dred Scott case from 1857. The Dred Scott case had said that Black people were not intended to be citizens in the Constitution because they were inferior, an inferior class of beings who had been subjugated by the dominant race. We threw off all of that. We formed a new union. Now, we hardly succeeded. The South rose up against the Reconstruction. They implemented Jim Crow. They implemented segregation. So we had a long, dark history struggling to maintain white supremacy. But we should never forget that we have those documents to look to in the Emancipation Proclamation, the Gettysburg Address, and the amendments to the Constitution. Professor Roosevelt ends, hopefully, that if we can see that rebirth of freedom and live up to those ideals, he says, if we can meet this moment, if we can rise to the challenge of making a better America, we can still be the heroes of our own story, and the future can be better than the past. If you are inclined, please go out, take a look for The Nation That Never Was, and I'm so grateful for your listening to my reflections.
First, I want to thank you, Steve. I think that's a fascinating book, and I agree with everything that you've said. As a Quaker, I came to believe that the American Revolution was a mistake. There were a lot of efforts to sever our ties with the British Empire nonviolently, and the Quakers and others were involved with that effort. It hasn't gotten the recognition that it deserves, but I think that if we had persisted a nonviolent course, we could have attained our independence from the British Empire like the Canadians and Australians without bloodshed. And I also feel, as you mentioned, that slavery was an important aspect of why we were so eager to sever our ties with England. So I put in the chat a link to a blog that I wrote called "Why I Prefer Juneteenth Over the 4th of July." I think Juneteenth truly celebrates the kind of freedom that we all strive for, whereas the 4th of July was, I think, really a mistake in terms of the direction our country moved. It perpetuated the myth of redemptive violence also, which is another thing that I feel strongly was a mistake in our history.
Thank you.
The Brit, I will agree with you there. It was a mistake.
Yes.
I wanted to say that Dr. Gerald Horne wrote a book called The Counter Revolution of 1776. And it's all about the owners of the US, the wealthy people, wanted to separate from Britain because Britain was moving towards emancipation. Fascinating. Anything by Gerald Horne.
So,
Anyway,
as it's been alluded to, over the last few years, over the history of ICUJP, there's been a natural camaraderie with the Parliament of the World's Religions. Because I think the tenet of ICUJP, that religious communities should not be blessing war and violence, pretty much fits hand in hand. And it's really great to be able to make a connection that, probably because of time, distance, a few other issues, we have not been able to do for a little bit. And get some information about things that the Parliament's working on right now, the convention in Chicago. And, we're very lucky to have the chairperson of the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions here today, Nitin Ajmera. He's been involved with many businesses in the New York area, and I guess on the East Coast. And I know you were involved with New York sports clubs. We might have met a long time ago when someone invited me to play squash at the New York Athletic Club. And, a sport that's more marathon and suffering than it is a game, I think. He played a vital role in the October 21 convention. And I think because of the same issues that we've had with the pandemic, it's only been this year that they've been able to do a in-house convening in Chicago like they are next month. So Mr. Ajmera is a member of the Jain faith, and he lives in Longview, or Long Island in Plainview, and with his wife Shefali, and they have one son. And Mr. Ajmera, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here. Getting to know the body of your work just through your introductions is humongous. I'll take you through. I have a lot of time. Generally, I'm never given so much time. So I have learned to become a speaker who is fast and succinct. But if I have the opportunity I think so, I have an hour. Is that what I have with me? So we'll go through a lot of things in this 1 hour because there's a lot that we can discuss and work on and continue with the partnership. But if you could give me by nods, have you all registered to be in Chicago in August? No. Well,
I think it's hard for some of the West Coast people to get out there.
But that is exactly where I will be taking you over the next 1 hour to understand why it is important for like-minded people to join hands, right? And show our strength in presence and in numbers, because that's the only way we are not going to be brushed off as a person with a small group trying to do a convention, but as a force. And why that is required is what is going to be the subject of my talk. And I would encourage all of you to come to Chicago. It's a beautiful summer in Chicago this August, and we'll go through that. To begin with, briefly about myself. Like I'm Nitin Ajmera. I am born in the Jain faith, was born in India, and my dad moved to Delhi when I was 2 years old from my hometown in Indore, which is the central part of India. And I went to a Christian missionary school that was set up by a couple from Atlanta. So they had come to Delhi and they set up this school in Delhi. And it was a young school, we were almost their first full-time batch of high school students. And so I had the privilege of studying in I call this schooling an important part of my learning and growth, because the school's name was Faith Academy, right? So the principal tenet of the schooling was to grow young men, boys and girls, to be people of faith, right? And the school's motto was, truth shall make you free, right? So we grew up learning the fact that it is the truth and truth only that will take you on the other side of every issue. And through truth, you can conquer wars, you can win arguments, you can make the impossible possible. So throughout my schooling, 12, 13 years, that was the growth and understanding that values create a personality, and personalities that are bathed in faith can take us on the other side. Obviously, in the young age, but at the same time, another very important thing happened for me, which at that time, it seemed like more of a survival or something that I just wanted to get on the other side. But over time, it has been an immense change factor for me in terms of who I am. So as you all know, in 1984, in India, there were riots after the assassination of the Prime Minister of the country. And those riots were targeted towards a particular community of Sikhs. And Delhi was, quote unquote, burning in fire because neighbors turned on each other, and it was considered to be like one man did something to somebody, but the whole community was being blamed at that time. And I was 12 years old at that time. For the first time, I had seen the world turn that way on me. And I had no idea what was going on and why it is required to get so much violence. Schools shut down. I remember very vividly the night of 2nd of November. There was this huge crowd that wanted to come on our street and burn down our houses in the street that belonged to the Sikh community. And various members of the Hindu community of our street, including my dad, went and argued and said, there is no way you're doing anything on this street. And they stopped the mob from entering our street because they said, you just cannot burn their houses because our houses will burn down too. We were like, the walls of our houses on our street were all common walls. So you just can't isolate one house and not. So they did not let them come through. And I was hearing and watching this all through a peephole of my door and putting my ear around on the door to see what I can hear and everything. And I was like scared to the core as a 12-year-old boy. And I was like, oh my God, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if my dad gets attacked by this crowd? And what? And they went away. Went away the whole night. The neighbors patrolled the streets to protect everybody. Obviously, things started getting calmed down on 3rd onwards, but there was mayhem for 2-3 days in the city of Delhi and other parts of India too. And our schools opened almost after 13-14 days. And going back to the school was not so simple because we knew through the newspapers that a lot of people of that community were, quote unquote, dead, right? The riots had killed them. And many of my friends in school were from the Sikh community. So personally, I was living for 13 days thinking, what is going on with those friends of mine and their parents and their families? And he was a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends. So when 13 days later, the schools opened, we went to school. I saw my friend, Daman, and I went and hugged him. I honestly don't even know if he remembers it, but I remember very vividly and very clearly my longing to see him, my longing to know him, that everything is okay. And he and his family were fine. His dad was okay and everything. And I felt such a relief that everything is okay for him and his family. But it was not okay for many others. And it was then that I believed that an important aspect of my personality and my thing came up is that I do not ever want any but relationship, any issues to escalate to a point of that hatred, right? That simple, it was not simple, agreed. Somebody killing somebody is not simple, right? An individual killing another individual is not simple. But taking that event and projecting it to an entire community was also not fair, right? And what are the underlying assumptions or underlying discussions that were missed? And I started pondering over that. And in my entire life since then, from that point of me being 12 years to now, a lot of that has come together for me in terms of I need to be that bridge that connects people with differing viewpoints, because that's my job, to get people to the table to sit down and talk, because small arguments can create bigger issues. And that is not what we want. People call me that I'm always the mediator. People call me that I never jump the fence. People call me that, why are you making sure that people are like listening to each other and talking to each other? Well, that is exactly what I want to do, because I have gone through a personal life event that changed my course, where my job is not to take sides and say, I'm right and you're wrong. My job is to say, okay, am I right and why are you not right? And is there a way where we can come together to understand each other? As a Jain faith, one of the basic tenets, obviously nonviolence is our biggest tenet, ahimsa, but we are also the community that believes and propagates anikantvad, which is multiplicity of viewpoints. And a multiplicity of viewpoints for us is a classic story of an elephant and 4 blind men. The 4 blind men come to an elephant and they're looking at it and they're touching it and they're saying, oh, you know what? This is a big trunk, a big pillar. No. This is a big fan. What are you talking about? No. It is a brush, a big brush with a thing. And the other one is saying, no. This is a big door and a like rugged door. Everyone is saying it from what limited viewpoint they have, what they are touching and how they can physically convert their sense of touching into what they think the product is. But then a wise man comes and says, no. You are all seeing a small part of this thing. But if you put it all together, this is one object, and this one big object breathes and lives and is an elephant, right? So a total different perspective was provided when a complete aspect of it was brought together. So unless and until differing viewpoints are brought together, we will never get the full picture, right? We will never get it, right? In what, Steve, you just said, right? For me, the American independence and the American story of independence is all about like a forerunner to the Indian independence movement, right? As if I want to be free, I want to be in charge of my destiny. I'll take care of how I live. You don't need to tell me how I live. Today, you just gave me a perspective, right? I want to break free because I do not agree with your ideology of inclusion, of everyone being equal, and I want to be separate because I still want to own men and women as slaves and I'm the owner, right? It's a perspective, but these perspectives were brought, people had issues, they thought they were a better race, they know more, they can deal with societies better. While they had to let go of America in 1776, they did not let go of India until 1947, right? Almost 200 years later is when the same people said, yeah, we have no rights to rule over you either. And things like that take time. And when things take time, right, the discussion needs to remain live, because otherwise it becomes the story of the past. Somebody said so, somebody did so. And that is where we as a society sometimes lose an important dimension of information that is not available otherwise. And hence, in my growing up, I remained, obviously got very attracted professionally and career-wise to come to America from India. Did my master's from Drexel University in Philadelphia in finance and information systems, and joined a job, started working in that job. And I was all about that material wealth and pleasure and happiness, and money defined everything to me. And then in late 2008, I was called upon by one of my friends at the temple at New York, the Jain Temple, Jain Center of America, and said, Nitin, I'm trying to put my hat in for the president of the temple, and I would like you to join me in the executive committee as an administrator. And I said to her, why not? Let's do it. I would like to spend some time in a social work, and if I can help my temple in any way, that would be fine. Let's do it. And she won the elections, and I joined her. And that was a turning point for me, because it was not a professional environment anymore where you're given a task and you do the task. Very soon I realized I'm working on a voluntary basis with like-minded people, but every like-minded person has a mind of his or her own, and they all want to pull in different directions. They had different ideas of doing the same thing. Now, who is the one who is going to win? Because in an organizational professional setup, as I say, the highest paid opinion wins, right? So whoever is the highest paid person is the one who's going to call the shots and make the decision. But in a voluntary organization where we are all equals, whose solution is to be implemented, and how do we do that? And early on, I realized this is where I need to start building the bridges and bring people together and bring their ideas together. And I started getting involved in that. At the same time, my wife was getting involved in art, and she's an artist. So she was doing a lot of artwork. And somehow she got one of her friends to tell her that she should carry her art to the Parliament of World Religions in Melbourne. And we were there, Anthony. So me and my wife took a trip all the way to Melbourne, Australia. We were there for 7 days. And that was my first introduction to Parliament and its work. And I was just blown away. I was, oh my God, the world is doing so much to make a difference and make a better place. And what a great organization Parliament is. And look how they meet together with ideas and thoughts. And here are all the people who are talking about that we are not in a perfect place. We still need a whole lot to do and a whole lot to go to. And so I got attracted towards the Parliament through the Melbourne convening. But I remained a bystander, visitor, follower, being aware of that. But in the Jain Center of America, I got more and more involved. In the next term, I became first the vice president and then the president. So through that role, I got involved in a lot of local forums and places, and all the Jains of America have a huge organization called JANA, where all the temples of North America and all its members meet once every 2 years. I got involved in that, and life was just very involved in the Jain faith and everything. And 2016, my term ended at New York Jain Center. So I said, you know what? I've spent a good 7-8 years of my life keeping this as a priority. Need to focus a little bit on my career. My son, who was in high school, so he needs time for his college education preparations and everything. And so took a break from that, but still started getting involved in a few things here and there. And then 2018, I was in Toronto for the convening. And again, I was like, wow, this is just an amazing place to be. And it so happened that immediately after that, few members of my community recommended my name to the Parliament to be the Board of Trustees and a representative from the Jain faith. And I went through the process of interviews and understanding. And then in March of 2019, I joined the Parliament as a trustee. And it was, I think so, less than a month. And I was told our treasurer at that time resigned. And they said, Nitin, you come from a finance background. You're a CFO. So can you be a treasurer for the Parliament? And I said, sure, why not? I'll be a treasurer for the Parliament. And accounting comes natural, and for profit or not for profit is fine. So I took over that. And boy, oh boy, right? Sometimes you get baptized by fire, and that's where I got into. The Parliament had a very unsuccessful Toronto convening from a financial perspective. Our registrations were not good enough for the costs and the expenses that were laid out. And our vendors were looking for their payments. Contracts were written with promises that were not kept. And as a treasurer, I got into the middle of all of that as my starting endeavor within the organization. And I started with that, and I said, you know, and okay, let's look at it. And I looked at a lot of things. So for example, you know, in the we had promised to various hotels so many room nights, and hotels claimed that we did not give that many room nights, so they were charging us for all the missed opportunity. And I asked Marriott, I said, show me a list of all the people who said that they were coming here for the Parliament. And I was not on the list. I said, I was at your Marriott. If I was at the Marriott, how am I not on the list? I was there at the Parliament. I was there at the convening. What are you talking about? Obviously, there was no process put in place to say, if you're registering through us, give this code so Marriott knows that you're coming from a Parliament perspective. So we went through all the hotel guest lists and corroborated that with the members or people who had signed up, and reduced that payment to the hotels like crazy, right? And various other things like that. So we were able to negotiate a lot of our payments, correct many of them. And we finally, by the end of December, with the work of the then chair and other people in the board, were able to get Parliament to a substantially reduced payment schedule, and also were able to raise enough loans and funds to pay for it. And somewhere by December, we started breathing again. We were like, okay, it took us a year, but we're there. And then as I was getting more involved with the Parliament in late December, early January, in 2020, COVID hit. And all our inbound funds froze. And obviously, the costs also went down because obviously in COVID, nothing was happening. But we somehow tried to manage almost a full year in the world of COVID. And as I would say, it was challenging. Parliament had a very challenging 2019 and 2020. We tried to apply for some of the ERTC loans and the government PPP loans as a nonprofit. that gave us a little bit of breather to pay our staff and our teams. And all that happened. But one thing that remained very strong in me was that the purpose for which the Parliament exists is not for profit, right? It exists to create a difference in the world and create a better world for all of us tomorrow. So as long as that purpose is genuine, there will be somebody out there who will come and help us and take us out and deal with it. Somehow we were in that discussion and there were opposing views. And in those opposing views within our trustee board, during the 2020 elections, the board chose me to be their chairperson for the year 2021. And I was given that role to lead as a chair of the trustees of the Parliament of the World's Religions. And I was like, okay, I'll take it, I'll do it. And in January, February, I sat with the remaining board members. We all sat down and we said, you know what do we do here? Because looks like that the pandemic is in the rearview mirror and it's not ahead of us. But how do we change things and make the Parliament more of that it exists for a purpose and not does exist for convenings alone. And as we came up with those, the biggest thing that we as a board said at that time, and our executive director, Stephen, was instrumental in coming up with a concept of having a virtual convening, because we could not meet physically somewhere, but we could meet virtually. And we started working and we said we are going to do it in October of 2021. It was 6 months away. As we all know, in any team, any group, there are people who are always going to tell you the risks around things. Many people call them the naysayers. I call them, they are our risk guardians, right? Because whenever they say, hey, you cannot do this, they're telling us a reason why something can go wrong for us to not do it. So they are just highlighted a risk that needs to be taken care of. And so we had a few of those discussions where why it is not possible, while there were many of us who said, we're doing it. We have to do it. We have to create buzz about the Parliament. And in that process, we created our convening. We got a lot of videos because it was online. We wanted to avoid live presentations like this because we were not sure about the technology and whether we didn't want to make it sound like a Zoom meeting, right? So we wanted to make it sound like a convention where people could interact and do things like that. And so we we worked with this platform called Axel Events. Amazing people. I think so. They gave us the possibilities of how to do a convention online. And we got more than 500 plus videos, performances, and everything was then queued in as one running show for 3 days, one after another. And they were live chatting allowed throughout the events. So we were chatting with our people. We did one-on-ones with our thing called Meet the Board, where anybody could sign up to meet one of the board members. And we all were physically present on a Zoom call like this to answer questions and things like that. And it was a big hit. People just loved it. People loved the ability to interact. The people loved the ability to meet other people, talk to them, chatting, see the programs, hear lectures. And all this material was available for 90 days afterwards that people could go and still look at it and hear it later. And we had an amazing experience. The Parliament raised substantial amount of funds to go forward. And in this process, my site selection committee worked on their agenda to find a physical space to do the next convening. And in that process, we were pushing, and we got in touch first with the city of Chicago, and the city of Chicago then came forward and gave us this huge ability to do it at the McCormick Center. And at the very end, in our online convening, we announced Chicago as our next destination, which was very well received by the community. And today we are exactly 1 month away from our convening. 14th of August, we will be meeting in Chicago for our 9th convention. And that's my journey, right? I have gotten more and more involved in the interfaith space. Obviously, I'm still very involved in the Jain faith space, but the interfaith attracts me, right? I have a deep, life-changing event that created a need in me to foster brotherhood, sisterhood amongst people, right? I do not ever want or do not want any other child to ever go through that experience of a mob trying to ruin a neighborhood, and or your own friends subject to that, and you don't know about that for 12, 13 days until you go back to school to find out who is survived and whose father is still alive and whose mother is still okay, right? It is a life-changing event for me. And hence, when I got the opportunity to work in the interfaith space, and I saw the beauty of interfaith, right? And how men and women of different backgrounds come together to discuss their differences. I call those differences perspectives, to find a common solution. And then when I look at what Parliament's primary goal is, where they believe that it is the faith that will derive solutions to human problems, right? Yes, men and women can work together. You and I can work on everything. But what we bring to the table is what our faith tells us. That's what guides us. So if we can find solutions to our problems through faith, more people in the world will accept to those solutions than if we find those solutions without faith, right? Because somewhere we all go back to our faith, and our faith, if we cannot align with our faith in that, those solutions may not get implemented. So putting all these aspects of my life together, where faith was important to me as a high school, whose school name was Faith Academy, as a Jain who believes in Anikantwad and multiplicity of perspectives and nonviolence, as a person who went through a life-changing event of a mob attack in neighborhood, I find Parliament to be a place where I can give my due effort to create a difference and be a small drop. I am not a force. I'm not anybody that people think I am. I'm very small force in a vast ocean of people who have a desire to get to a better world for our kids tomorrow, whether it be through various issues that I want to present to you now, is a small PowerPoint that I would like to take you and show you how we at the Parliament continue to create a better world for all of us. So let me share my screen. So the 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions, right? These are some of our contact info, but as Rick just said, he has already provided these to you, but we are available at 2023POWR.org. Our hashtag is 2023 POWR, Parliament of World's Religions. The Parliament is the world's largest, most diverse and inclusive interfaith convening of people of faith, spirituality, and goodwill, right? So you don't need to be ordained in any faith to be a part of the parliament. As long as you believe in spirituality and or in the good of people, you're welcome, right? And even if you don't believe in any of this, you're still welcome, right? One of our very large emerging group of people who come to our conventions are atheists. They're calling themselves atheists, right? So everyone is welcome. It's all inclusive. Everybody's here. It's an organized 501c3 nonprofit organization by the same name, headquartered in the city of Chicago. So Chicago is the place. And we boast of a historic legacy that dates back to 1893 World's Parliaments of Religions. We belong to that group, and I'll talk about that in a second. Our mission is to cultivate harmony amongst the world's religious and spiritual communities, and to foster their engagement with the world and its guiding institutions to address the critical issues of our time. Our vision is that we want to see a world of peace, justice, and sustainability, right? Something that we can pass on to our next generations, and a one where everyone is happy and wants to be part of it and not say that this is a bad place to be. So back in 1893, right, in the World's Fair that was being organized in Chicago, the then leaders at that time said, hey, why not we at this time also bring people of different religious faiths so we can get them to explain to us what their religion is about, right? It's the East meets West kind of a theory. And it was more inquisitive just to bring people together to explain things. And back in then, we had about 3,000 to 7,000 people attend that World's Fair along with our religion focus on it. That's when 1893 happened. Charles Bonney, Susan B. Anthony, Swami Vivekananda, Veer Chandraghav Gandhi, Agarikar, various people came in, and the interfaith movement was born that time back in 1893. After that, there was a lot of thought about reviving the parliament, but different branches took off and various interfaith organizations got formed around the world. But parliament as such did not exist until in 1993. Few people all came together and said, we're going to do a centenary celebrations of the 1893 Parliament. And the 1993 Parliament was organized in Chicago as a centenary celebrations. And at that time, a groundbreaking document was signed towards a global ethic and initial declaration. Now, why this global ethics is important is it's a document about how mankind should treat each other. It was not written by a political government organization. It was not written by United Nations. It was written by and signed by fellow people of faith. 250 such men and women got together and signed the global ethics document, creating a forum, or it is our signature document that we have, creating a basis for all our projects, our work, and everything is guided by the 1993 Global Ethics document. Then in 1999, we took the parliament to South Africa, Cape Town, and President Nelson Mandela spoke at the parliament along with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Mary Maguire and many others. We had 7,000 plus attendees. From there, we went to the Barcelona, Spain in 2004. And Shirin Ehadi, Jane Goodall, Karen Armstrong were key speakers, 9,000 attendees. Our next parliament was in Melbourne in 2009. And that's where my journey began, as I said earlier. And it was an amazing space. President Jimmy Carter was there. Sri Ravi Shankar spoke, and Auntie Joy and various other people. And it was in a beautiful setting in Melbourne. And I have memories of it that I can never forget. Which took us next to 2015 Parliament. We brought it home again in Salt Lake City. And it was an amazing place where for the first time we started with a women's assembly and a women's charter was signed. And it is one of the highest attended Parliament of us, 10,359, and an amazing experience that went through at that point. From there, Salt Lake City, we stayed in North America, but we moved it to Toronto next. And in 2018, another 8,324 attendees, very successful Parliament from a programming and events and buzz and everything. Had some financial challenges and that caused a little bit of concern, bringing us to the 2021 Parliament, which was a virtual Parliament. And in this, obviously, our theme was opening our hearts to the world, compassion in action, because we were all very concerned with the pain that the world had gone through with the pandemic, right? With the loss of lives, loss of interaction, and a lot of things had happened that has caused a lot of pain. And we wanted us as Parliament to be open to that pain and open our hearts to the world and bring compassion in our dealings with each other. From the 2021 Parliament, we're now moving towards the 2023 Parliament, which is 130th anniversary of the original 1893 and the 30th anniversary of our global ethics document, which was 1993. So this is our next convening. We're looking forward to it. And it will be hosted at the McCormick Place Lakeside Center from August 14 to 18. The convening will address the most urgent and critical global issues of our time: freedom, democracy, and human rights. Going back to our theme here is a call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights. And basically when we as a board were thinking about our theme for the Parliament, we were very clear that something is not right in the post-pandemic world that we are living in. And what is not right is that the freedom, the democracy, the human rights that we all talk about, that we have given meanings to these words and that we exist with a purpose, with defining all this as if they are all achieved. And very soon we realized, as we were pondering over the theme, and with no offense to anybody if he or she believes otherwise, that the Roe v. Wade was taken away by our Supreme Court, and women's women's right to choose was again on the table for discussion. And we believed at that time, and we said, you know what, something is not right about all this. If this is on stage right now for further discussions again, what else is on stake? And where else is our freedom, our democracy, our human rights are going to be challenged? And honestly, friends, in the last 1 month, more of these issues have been put on the table for discussion. And our courts have rejected a lot of things, which I find it very surprising that a group of men and women, 7 or 12 in numbers, can decide what the country of 350 plus million people can do. And then if you come back to our voting process and our things, it is a very divided world that we live in. 49.9 versus 50.1. And if I take all this back to my own personal life experiences, it is this bridge that I need to bridge between the 49.9 and the 50.1% people, because both views seems to have equal weight, but is the view that tells us that you do not have choice to rule, you do not have a right to choose, or the view that says you are not the right person, you are not the person with equal rights, whether you belong to certain gay rights or lesbians or whatever, or if there is an extension of that, and if this takes us and says, oh, you cannot have a right to choice of your faith or anything. Call to conscience, my friend. Are we in the right place? Is this the world that we want to live in, where our own rights to choices are at stake? And that's the call of this convention. That's the call, the theme of this convention, is we are calling you to think again. If you are in that 49.9% category that does not give free choices to our LGBTQ communities, to our women, to our indigenous faith, who do not believe that the climate change is a reality and we are going towards an apocalypse, or we are in apocalypse, then think again. We call your conscience to think again and think, what are human rights? What is freedom and what is democracy? And what are those mean? What does that exactly mean? And I have been saying it from day one in various forums. I don't want the people who believe, who are the 50.1% people right now, I just don't want those people to come. I want the 49.9 also to come so we can understand their perspective, so we can start bridging the gap, so we can bring things together. That's what we're looking forward to. And that's a theme. We are celebrating that. We want you to come and have that discussion and engage in those discussions. And we are bringing it back to the birthplace of the modern interfaith movement. 130 years ago, city of Chicago welcomed us. 30 years ago, they welcomed us again with the global ethic document. And here we are working towards that.
In 1893, religious leaders from around the globe came together in Chicago for the first Parliament of the world's religions. The meeting was a groundbreaking gathering of representatives of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. Today, it is recognized as the birth of interfaith dialogue worldwide. 100 years later, at the 1993 Parliament in Chicago, religious leaders came together again to affirm the Declaration Towards a Global Ethic. The Declaration is a powerful statement of the ethical common ground shared by the world's religious and spiritual traditions. Now, 30 years later, representatives of the world's religious traditions will once again gather in Chicago to affirm human rights and the productive discourse that comes from interfaith dialogue.
The 2023 Parliament convening in Chicago will address one of the foundational issues of our time, the threat to freedom and human rights. We must defend freedom and human rights together and find solutions to the rise of autocracy in our world. Through this lens, gathered participants will discuss the threat to democracy, the crisis of climate change, the dignity of women and girls, the rights of Indigenous peoples, engaging the next generation, peace, justice, the reduction of inequalities, and more. The Parliament will be a place of open minds and open hearts, where we can all express the wonder and dignity of our religious and spiritual traditions against the backdrop of the majestic beauty of Lake Michigan.
The world was called to Chicago in 1893 and 1993. 30 years later, the world is called again. Join us. Get involved today by becoming an exhibitor or sponsor, joining the Parade of Faiths, hosting a pre-Parliament event, or volunteering at the 2023 Parliament.
All are welcome. Register now.
The Parliament is remarkable. We create programming from our various faith traditions, which you see here and are gathered in front of us as well. And we address the key issues of our time. We have task forces that are devoted to Indigenous concerns, to women's concerns, to climate, to peace and justice, to the global ethic, which is our guiding document. People gather in remarkable communities and conversations for 5 days. And what's probably one of the most exciting things about what we do is that we have an open policy. We throw open the doors and we ask the world to send us the conversations that they want to have, to propose the panels and the programs and the workshops and the opportunities to participate in religious services and ceremony. And the response is overwhelming. We get thousands of programs that are submitted to us. And then our various task forces get to work in reviewing them. And we say yes to as many as we possibly can. We always try to squeeze about 50 pounds of programming into a 5-pound sack. I think most important of all is that when people come, they get to experience something that everybody longs for, right? They get to experience a community that comes together wherever the Parliament is held in the world, and this time it's going to be in Chicago, and they get to experience the world as we all long for it to be. Peaceful, curious, open-hearted, and not just tolerant, but grateful for our diversity. Right? And so when they come, they're going to have an opportunity to be in a very special, a very safe space, and a very special space, and to leave with the inspiration that it really is true, that the thing that we long for, the thing we long to be, we are.
I love the not just tolerant.
Yes, yes. Phyllis wants us to celebrate, and it should be.
I don't want people tolerated. I want them loved.
Yes, and somewhere we thought that all we need to do is respect diversity and just say it's okay, you're around me and you're different from me. But I think so where we need to focus on is we need to start celebrating the diversity, be grateful to it, right? I generally say I'm a person who doesn't like a bouquet of red roses. I always love a bouquet of flowers, right? With different colors and shades and leaves and everything. That makes my room look better than just a red rose, 12 or 24 of them. And that's where things are. And that's what this convention is about. This convening is about. Honestly, I've been fortunate to work now with so many people in the Parliament who are trustees, who have rotated off or who have joined us recently. When I was made the chair, we were only 19 trustees at that time, that year. Then we dropped to 17. And 17 of us became the core group, especially for the 2021 Parliament convening, the digital one. And today we are 34 strong people, right? So when we go out for a batch of new trustees, because our trustees rotate off every 6 years, right? So there's a batch that rotates every 6 years. When we are going out now for asking for people to join us, all of a sudden we are getting a large increase in inbound applications and references because everyone is starting to get excited about what Parliament does. And so one of the things that after this convening, obviously, people say that the Parliament exists for convenings. So we go from one convening to another, which is not true, right? As a Parliament, yes, we do work at a convening level, but we have various task forces that Phil has talked about. And those task forces are doing things at a very ground root level at different places. So for example, our Climate Action Task Force is one of the most active task forces amongst all others. And they took out a book, Faith for Earth, like a year ago. They got it published and it's available with the UNEP program. They worked in parallel with UNEP and they got it there. Another thing right now we are working on is, once the United Nations agreed on the right to clean environment as a human right, we are now actively working in getting the governments of the world to adopt that human right, a right to clean environment, right? Unless until we have it as a right to clean environment, the challenge we are going to have with climate action is that what we see today, I may say that there is a climate issue. You may not agree with me. One may not agree with me. So unless until we claim it that it is a right to have a clean environment, these arguments will never go. They will never go that there is an issue with the climate. And look at the way the climate is acting up lately in all places. Like it's just, as a scientist, as a student of science, there is no reason for Earth to behave this differently in my 50 years of my life. There is no reason, right? Right. The only reason why it's behaving so differently in my age group, in my lifetime itself, is because we have damaged it that much, right? So these are the things where I come very quote unquote opinionated, right? But it's not my opinion. It is about how I believe and how I believe the world needs to start focusing on these issues. And the beauty of mankind is, right, that in the end, we solve all our problems. On the face, it may look like that we may not be able to solve it, right? When the pandemic hit, all of us were like, is this the way we are going to die, right? That we're all going to stay home for the rest of our lives and that's it. But our scientists got to work, our hospitals and nurses, doctors kept working, saving us, and we found a solution, we found a vaccination, and now we are on the other side of it, right? So the adversity will cause human race to rise above it. But we have to agree that there's an adversity. And many times we disagree on those fronts. And Parliament is a place for those discussions to say, yes, the problem does exist. And if the problem does exist, we will work towards finding a solution for it. And the first step is to agree on the Parliament. So that's what I have for all of you. I'll open up to questions if I can help you with anything. And
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving me this
I
opportunity.
see Ruby has her hand up and then Steve.
I'm just so excited. First, well, Steve, thank you for bringing us up with the past and everything. But when he came on with what the clarity of the purpose of the world religions is about, that's what excited me as a religious scientist, because I was very fortunate when I guess America was going with the what they said with the Black and with all that. I was very fortunate to be with a group in Colorado in my neighborhood with all nationalities. So I was able to go with Rebecca to her different adventures from school and stuff, and just all the different, the Chinese and everything, because this is what I had as friends. And so when growing up and becoming a religious scientist, I was looking at the positive changes and the positive way to trade. And this seems like this is what is happening now with the world religion, as it's supporting the different things that are coming up. And for me, it's like the different balances is how the different nationalities can make it in their religions in certain areas, and then trade, positive trade. And I mean, gosh, I'm very excited now because you've become more clear for me, what this purpose is of your work. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ruby.
Steve?
And I do want to come to Chicago now. It was so funny. because everybody said, and everybody was shaking their head no, and I was shaking my head no, too, in the beginning, because I was thinking Chicago, Windy City, but as you brought the clear purpose, while to come, I'm sitting here trying to figure out, yes, those 5 days would be great, would be really great. How can I get there? What is it that I can do? Do I have time? I mean, all these things came to my mind after you became clear on the purpose of the event and the purpose of your work. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you so much. That is very encouraging, very encouraging. Steve?
Thank you, Nitin. This has just been a terrific presentation. I went to Northwestern University. I spent many wonderful days and weeks in Chicago. It's an amazing city. Would love to be able to carve out the time to join you. I want to ask for some clarification, because you began by saying that the Parliament, we're not to take sides. And you emphasized that early in your remarks. We don't take sides. And I put notes in my pad. And then later, you are taking sides. You are defending freedom and human rights. You are seeking equal rights. You are taking sides. So explore that with us, what the meaning of not taking sides, and then hearing of your task forces and the actual work that you're doing.
Right. So when I say personally, I'm not taking sides, as I don't want to be in a box where I don't want to encourage other opinions to come forward, right? Because in the concept of multiplicity of viewpoints, I want to get everybody's perspective of why this is this way and why it is not this way for you. So before I get to a side and I say this is the right path for us, everyone's viewpoint has to be discussed. So it's like you do not want people of the same thought to come together and solve a problem, because then they will solve the problem from their perspective only. You need people from all backgrounds, all faiths, all viewpoints, all perspectives to come and discuss the problem so we can solve for the problem from everybody's perspective. Now, when we solve from this problem from everybody's perspective, eventually we will get to a point where we will start leaning to a particular decision, right? That may still be not a happy medium for some people and their perspectives. And that is where the work needs to get, right? To get those people on the other side. As Gandhiji said during his discussions in the Simla Convention, everybody has to agree the way we want our freedom. The way freedom was being designed was there was a freedom for the Hindus and the freedom for the Muslims, right? And Gandhiji said, no, we need to get to a freedom for all of us. And he kept the entire Simla Convention, continued to discuss and argue about why does independence for Hindus and independence for Muslims differ from each other? Because one thing was still given, everybody agreed we want independence. But these two different nation states was something that he did not want. And it took an entire convention. And at the end of the convention, it had to be this way. And he said, okay, if I can at least get independence, let's go there, let's start there, and then we'll worry about everything else later, right? But if he had not said to my Muslim friends from Pakistan, the now Pakistan at that time, you're not allowed because your definition of independence is not what we're looking for. Guess what? We would have never been where we are. Like, so eventually you have to take sides, Steve. You have to get on the side of the right? But before we define what is right, let's discuss and get everybody's perspective. And for those who then do not agree that this is right, for those who will not say that women have equal right, those who do not say that indigenous people have the right, then we have to get them to understand why these rights are important and why they're not seeing it the right way, and help them, right? That's the work, right? The work is not in saying women have rights. The work is in getting the people who believe they don't have rights to start believing that they have rights. And that's where our effort has to come together as a team, as a group of people who have a common understanding of the problem.
Wow.
Thank you.
That was really intense. Anthony.
Thank you so much, Nitin. Like you, my experience with the Parliament was really life-changing. And I think coming from a liberal Quaker perspective, what I had to overcome was a certain parochialism, like the thought, well, we Quakers, we're the ones who are doing peace and justice, as if others weren't as much. So it was, for me, a wonderful experience to be part of a bigger community, a worldwide community with people of different faiths, all of whom share common values and a commitment to peace and social justice. So that opened my eyes, and it also opened my world. I have since gotten to know a little bit better the evangelical world, and realized that it's very hard for them to embrace the idea of many of them, not all of them, but it is hard for them to embrace the idea that all religions are, have truth, and for them it's Christianity. That's the way, the truth, and the life. But what I do find is that when we work together on a common issue like ending homelessness, that those theological differences can sort of be set aside, so we can focus on a common effort to solve a problem that we all agree needs to be solved. So my question to you is, have you been at all successful in bringing to the Parliament evangelicals and others who tend to shy away from the interfaith movement?
Yes, right. But is it at a place where we are very happy with their participation? No, right? But one person at a time, one group of people at a time, right? To be very honest, I personally believe that, and if you go back to the history of the 1893 Parliament, it is designed from a group of people who literally wanted to understand how Jesus is about everybody, and how did he, when he defined everybody, did he define a small group of people or everybody in the world? But if everybody in the world is not believing in him, is he still the savior and the path to it? That's how it all started for that person, an individual, to get to know the other religions of the world, and then he found the common thread of love and compassion amongst all religions. And that's what interfaith is all about, right? In the end, one will realize that there is nothing different. I go to Philadelphia to teach, and in Philadelphia, there is a Sparks Genetics company. The Sparks Genetics company has an advertisement on their billboard up there that says, let's focus on the 99.9% that is common amongst all of us. 99.9% of the human genome is same for every individual. So it's the 0.01 that is different that we are all worried about all the time, right? And that 0.01 creates all the diversity, the beauty that exists. It's such a different place. Like for me, I was born in India, so as Indians, people will say I'm an Indian, but yes, I'm an Indian. But I was a Jain, a Hindi-speaking Jain, living in Delhi, which is primarily Hindus and Sikhs dominated, went to a Christian missionary school, and my best friend was in Muslim Islamic faith. So in my growing up, I saw every aspect of religion around me, and I struggled with what is the difference. I could not find the difference. All our differences exist in how we manifest our faith by going to temples or mosques or gurdwaras or churches, right? by either lighting a candle or lighting an incense stick, right? Bowing down with our knees forward or with our hands forward. But all we are working on is that one concept of, I want to be treated with respect and love, because that's how I will treat everyone around me. That's all it is in the end. So I don't know specifically if there is an individual who's an evangelical and as a member and is coming to the parliament, but I do know that we have more than 40 different faiths that people have identified themselves with, and Christians are the majority, right? So I strongly believe that our Christian friends believe in interfaith, because that's why they are there. They want to hear, and that is Christ's biggest message. It's about love, and it's about the doors of the heaven, as per him, are open for everybody that believe in him. It is not open for anyone who is from a certain faith and believes in that faith only. So Bible is very clear about that. And obviously in my high school, through my school education, I had the opportunity to read the whole Bible. So I've been blessed that way to understand where my Christian friends come from. And I enjoy it. I've enjoyed it throughout my life. So, yeah.
Well,
Thank you. That was helpful.
great. Michael?
Yeah, going back to some of the things you said at the very beginning, I think it's really impressive that you could come from, a kind of a traumatic experience about religious conflict and come to a position of wanting to reach out and communicate and heal. And I think that's I think that is an impulse in a lot of faiths. I was curious about sort of what you think about sort of secularization processes that are going on, and then the sort of counter to that of different faiths trying to the fact that you call it the Parliament for the World Religions. I think that's an interesting terminology, because Parliament, on one sense, is about speaking and discourse, but the other concept of Parliament is governing. A governing body, and there's an impulse, I think, in a number of different religions today that they want to sort of take over government in the name of their faith, and I'm wondering how you deal with that.
Yeah. So somewhere our religious faiths all throughout, in a very secluded nuclear societies that we were in, guided people to how to live, right? And what to do. As the world became a global place and we met each other, right? Our religion faiths, our beliefs in that, we wanted to carry forward and say, everyone should do it this way, right? So as that happened, my view of the 20th century is that the world got like, okay, we don't know who is right. We don't know who's wrong. So guess what? You know what? We're going to go secular, and we'll say, we don't know who's right, who's wrong. And we will not allow these discussions, especially in the workplace. And like back home in India, secularism meant, right, that there is no majority telling anybody else, and everybody can follow their own religious practices and beliefs and faiths and everything. And the governments started to choose themselves to be neutral, right? We do not comment on these issues. We do not get involved in things like that. To an extent, in India, there is the Hindu law, and there is a Jain law, and there is a Muslim law. And so the law, even when it came to how society can live, were broken up that way. For me personally, secularism is not about path of least resistance, but a path of celebration of all, right? You need to bring everybody and celebrate everybody and enjoy everybody. So if there is every day of the week, if there is a festival in one or the other religion, why not? What is a harm in celebrating that? What is the harm in saying we send our wishes to people who follow this, right? And individually and as people, we have found it troublesome to do it, but the Parliament doesn't, right? We have a master list of all festivals of all religions. And my person in charge of marketing and public outreach, Mariam, sends a message out to all the people of all those faiths, congratulating, celebrating them, right? That is secularism from a perspective of celebrate everybody out there, not take a path of least resistance and say, oh, you know what, because we will forget to send wishes to people of the, let's say, X faith, we will not send wishes for anything. And then obviously popular religions do get attention, and during Christmas, there's a natural tendency to end every message on your email with Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays or something like that, right? Now, many people tell me, they always write to me and say Happy Holidays, and I reply back to them and said Merry Christmas. And they were like, do you celebrate Christmas? And I used to write back and say, give me a reason why I should not. Right? And that's when, that's what I didn't understand in my growing up, or especially in my professional work. What is so wrong in telling somebody Merry Christmas, whether you believe in Christ or not, right? It's to be happy about something, right? So let's celebrate that. Similarly, you could say to me something about my religious faith, and I can reciprocate back in asking you to celebrate that too. That is what it is about, right? It is how we can make ourselves available to all, right? And if we miss somebody, it's not because we ignore them or we don't love them or anything. It just is a circumstantial evidence that we miss somebody. But at least an attempt was made to capture everybody and enjoy everybody. So that's what I believe in. I am very sure that the world is getting more polarized, right? And in that polarization, in the name of democracy, in the name of popular votes, we are going to decide what is right for the majority other people, right? We will say we are coming through a democratic election process, and in a democratic election process, I am being told I can do this, right? So hence, I am going to pass a law that will not allow XYZ thing to happen. And that is exactly what we are fighting against, right? Because we are very divided humans right now. And the voting process is not the way we are going to define fate of our 49.9% people or 50.1% people. We need to engage in a dialogue. We need to sit down together. We need to understand each other. And we need to find solutions together. That's the only way we can find solutions, not through the electoral process. That is not, it is the right thing to do, but majority wins is a bad statement. That's a bad statement, because I believe even one life should not be treated with disrespect. So it cannot be about majority wins.
Well,
And we can't.
I love the Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas. Do you celebrate? Well, why can't I? It's like, yes. I get so sick and tired of Happy Holidays all the time. You know, it's like, it's okay to say Merry Christmas. I don't see any other hands up. So I remember reading some years or some decades ago about all religions have had some really horrible things done in their name. And the Buddhists are known for being peaceful, but the Buddhists attack so-and-so in this place and that place. And the only exception of that are the Jain. And I had never heard of the Jain before. So I'd love to hear more about that, about your faith. But also, when you showed the second video and the woman was talking about how many issues that are being brought up, is there a list of those? Because I'd like to see, is there a discussion on Palestine? Is there a discussion on Cuba and other Latin American countries that are following a different path than what the US imperialists want them to do? So those two questions.
Here, I am very blessed to be of the Jain faith. Jainism was, as with all religions, right? It is considered the oldest religion of the world, right? We Jains also believe that every religion was first, everyone was Jain, and now they've converted into different religions. But the basic tenet of Jainism lies in the most important principle of ahimsa, which is nonviolence. Nonviolence to every other living being by mind, thought, words, or action. So even if you think about hurting somebody, you are doing a violent act as per a Jain, right? If you say bad words to people, you're saying you're doing violent act towards that person. And obviously, if you're hitting somebody, or you are doing a bad act of violence. So non-violence is the first thing. That is what we are taught. We are told when we are walking, our eyes should be on the ground, because if there are ants walking or crawling around, we should be careful on not stepping them, because we would accidentally kill ants that are walking around. So from that limited or very careful conscious living of walking, while walking, look down so that you don't hurt ants. When we look at creating any kind of a attack on another community or groups of people or things, Jains will never do that, because we believe, following from that, is that you can do an act today and you may feel like it is a successful act today, but the karmic bondage of that negativity you will carry for your lifetimes after lifetimes, right? And that karmic bondage will come forward in different ways and manifest itself in different ways. So many times we are told not to do bad things, not because it is a bad thing for today, but that it may give you karmas that could cause bad in future periods. And the idea of a human soul for us is this constant cycle of life and death and life and death and life and death and everything, because we believe in reincarnation and everything. You could be in this mundane cycle, right? And you can be taking birth, dying day. And it's not that you're always going to take birth as human beings. Based on your karmas, you could be born as an ant, you could be born as an elephant, you could be born everywhere. So you'll continuously being living and dying and living and dying. You need to get out of this cycle. And to get out of this cycle, you need to get to the position of nirvana or moksha, where you do not come back to this life to this worldly horrors of death and life and everything. And to get to that nirvana, you need to get to a positive state of your soul. And a positive state of soul comes to you because by being good to other people, by not harming other people, by not telling a lie, by not stealing, right? By using only consuming to the extent you want to consume and not hoarding things for unnecessary consumption and all those things, right? So all these things to become an easier living lifestyle, because Leo Tolstoy wrote a very good saying, how much land does a man need? Right? If you read that story, you could run miles and miles in one day to capture that much land as per the king. But in the end, you're dead and you had to finally be put in the land that covered your body. That's all the land you need, right? So how much do you need for survival? That's what you work towards. And the rest you give up, or you then do not work for that, but do good things. Give your time in doing good things to keep improving positive karmas. And if your positive karmas keep improving, eventually you will have enough to get out of this cycle, and you'll take a tangent off and you will get to enlightenment and moksha. And that's what Jainism is about. So do Jains do bad things to people? Oh, yes, we do. Don't take me wrong. We are not Mr. Perfect religion out there either. But would a Jain abstain from attacking a community? Absolutely, yes. He or she knows that somewhere down, that is not the basic, like in the name of the faith, we cannot do it, right? We may do it as individuals, right? But we cannot say, oh, because we are Jains, we are going to attack a community. We cannot. That is, Jains are told that in situations where people attack you and you are having a difficult time, assume that it is the fruition of your bad karmas, and that is what you have to do. Stay calm, go into meditation, and let the attacker go by. Let them do what they want to do, and this too shall pass, is what we are being told. But by reacting and doing things, we will be creating more negative karmas. So we are not, that is what we are taught. So if things go bad, we go into a kind of a shell in a meditation mode, because we cannot be in a negative energy generates negative energy, and we don't want to do that. We want to stop it. That's to answer your first question. The second question, yes, there are so many programs. There are more than 500 plus programs in this convening. If you go to our website, all the programs are listed and their various tracks are being highlighted, right? So there are issues that are discussing the Palestine issue. There are programs that are discussing indigenous, women rights, birth control, violence, peace, justice, Ukraine war, next generation issues, right? Young minds, kids of PoWR. Everything is highlighted, and sometimes it is difficult to narrow down the tracks, right? Because you cannot have, the world may have 1,000 issues. Do we want to discuss all 1,000 issues in 5 days? We try to give everybody perspective. There are various panel discussions where things like this will discuss. But we have kept the tracks to a minimum from a focus point, so we can get something. And from that perspective, indigenous, women's, climate action, next generation, peace and justice, kids, and what am I missing? Global ethics. Yes, these are our key 8 tracks, 7 or 8 tracks, right, that we are working on. And but there are, as I said, more than 500 plus programs. We have so many great speakers who have agreed to speak at the Parliament and address all of us. So we're looking forward to, we have 5 plenaries, right? The first one is opening and a closing is the last one. In the middle, we have 3. One, that there is a crisis going on right now in the name of democracy and freedom and human rights. Then we want to call for conscience in our second plenary. And the third plenary is about finding solutions to these issues of democracy, freedom, and human rights. Then we have a women's assembly, which will highlight women's issues and rights and all those matters. And we have 2 climate action assemblies. One is about the crisis and one is about the solutions. And then we have a plenary on global ethics, because we want to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the global ethics document. So all in all, just the plenaries itself is about 9 of them with great speakers, and they're all 2 hours long with entertainment and speeches from various people. And I'm very excited about that. And during those plenaries, no other programs will be going on, because we want the community of all, right now we have 5,300 plus registrations, and it keeps going up every day. So we want all 5,300 people in one room when we are going through these 9 plenaries, because that is the power of all of us. That is the power of all of us.
Thank you so much.
But
Uh,
Mr. Ajmera, thank you very much for joining us. And I hope, as I mentioned, that this will be a way for us to get back involved with the Parliament, and hopefully some of us will be able to make it to Chicago. And even after that, I do want to be able to keep the dialogue open and share our work that way as well.